Happy Thursday, Non-Obvious Nation. We are back for another edition of the Non-Obvious Insights Show, and this is going to be an amazing, amazing day. We've got some great stories, as usual, and we've got a featured guest, Guy Kawasaki, coming on the show, one of my longtime mentors, amazing, friendly, and funny, and entertaining, and educational resource for all of you and for me as well. So I can't wait to get into the conversation with him, and I can't wait to talk about some stories with you, some non-obvious stories. And the first one for this week that I wanted to share is all about space. And I love the fact that we are talking about space beyond just kind of ordinary space exploration. And what I mean by ordinary is just conducting scientific experiments in space, which is important, but it's not sexy. And this week it was interesting because there were a couple of stories about how space might be getting a little more sexy. And what I mean by that is there's a Tom Cruise film that's going to be filmed in space with NASA's approval. There's a new space reality TV show coming out where contestants will compete to get a chance to go onto a mission to the space station in 2023. And really, the world of entertainment is starting to see space as a frontier to create content. There was even an Estee Lauder skincare commercial where they sent products up to space and had astronauts testing them out, and they're going to use the footage in TV ads. All of these things indicate that there's more to space than just the thing that I've been a little bit worried about, which is space mining, the idea that we're just going to go into space and exploit it for all the minerals and stuff like that. And when you see all of these doomsday stories about space and the opportunity for space, you don't often see that entertainment might be the first place to really commercialize a part of space in terms of using it for something that we consume. And these stories were kind of interesting because they did bring that idea to life. And I started to imagine what those would be. So I'm going to be looking forward to some of those films. Definitely going to be looking forward to that ad from Estee Lauder going into space. It's just an interesting frontier. Another story I was reading this week was about Netflix and their data-driven approach to choosing which shows to continue and which shows to cancel. And this was an interesting one because after 2 seasons, that's sort of the magic mark, according to this Wired UK article that I read. And this magic mark is something that I have seen for sure with shows, but I remember like it was almost 10 years ago. I remember there was a show that I got super, super into called Terra Nova. And I thought it was great. It was a science fiction show. It's exactly the show that's kind of up my alley. And it got canceled after a season. And I was totally bummed, but it changed my behavior in that moment. Because what I stopped doing at that point is getting into new shows. I wait for like season 3 before I get into them. And The 100 is the show that I'm totally into. And they're in their last few episodes now of their final season. But I got into that kind of 3 seasons in. I was just thinking, like, if more people are like me, right? If we're trained to only get into content once they have 3 seasons, but they never make it that far because of Netflix and other groups' kind of data-driven approach, shows don't get a chance to be amazing. And creators don't get a chance to be amazing because they have to show results super fast. And it's sort of this short-termism that we see in business too, in terms of like quarterly results. It's all about the quarter, right? And so I thought, like, what's the solution to that? I mean, should I myself start watching shows in their first season just to support them so that they survive? Or should Netflix and some of these other studios start relying more on expertise of people who are curators of these shows to really kind of get behind the show and love them enough to help them continue and survive? I mean, The Office, one of the most successful TV sitcoms of really all time, at least in the US, was notoriously almost canceled after the first season. It wasn't very good. But from the second season onward, it became awesome. And so, like, how long does a show need to succeed? That was just one of those things that I was kind of thinking about as I was reading that. Another story that sort of had multiple elements for me is I got my weekly issue of Business Week in the mail, which I still get kind of a subscription to. And Mark Zuckerberg was on the cover, and the whole article kind of talked about how Facebook interacts with political campaigns. But at the same time, I was watching a deep fake video. And this video was really interesting because when we talk about deep fakes, right, like synthetic videos, usually they're negative in terms of like how we see them, right? It's someone who's faking a video of their opponent to make them look bad, to maybe win an election, or to have some other kind of evil purpose. But this deepfake, which was done by an artist named Stephanie Lepp, was actually what Mark Zuckerberg would say if he could admit that he was wrong. And she writes this amazing script that is then read by a voice actor and matched up with a fake video that doesn't pretend like it's real. I mean, it says right from the beginning it's fake. But it imagines this reckoning, and the whole project is called Deep Reckonings. And it imagines what his reckoning might be like. And I just really enjoyed it, not only for the technology part of it, which I think is interesting, but also for the writing. I mean, the writing was amazing for what he might have said. And her whole intent with this is not to trick anyone into thinking Mark Zuckerberg actually did this. Her intent is to hopefully have someone pass it on to someone else who might eventually pass it on to Mark Zuckerberg himself, who might watch that video and say, that's the version of me that I'd like to be. And that's just like such a long game to play when it comes to this narrative art project. I just think it's really, really smart and interesting. One of the things that people always ask me when I talk about these stories every week is, are you optimistic, right? I mean, there's so many sources and reasons to be not optimistic. And one of the reasons why I do stay optimistic is because every week I see stories of interesting things changing. And one of those stories was Patagonia with their clothing labels that many of you might have seen, where they changed their clothing labels and essentially said, vote the assholes out. That's what the clothing label says. And to Patagonia, the assholes are the politicians who don't believe in climate science, who don't protect the earth, who don't encourage the right policies in their opinion, right? Another example of that was Lego switching to paper bags instead of plastic bags. And every week there's like all of these stories of this. I mean, IKEA opened a secondhand furniture store just this week also. And the pace of all of these changes is so fast that I think the only way to read those in a macro level is to say, look, we should be optimistic for the future. Like, because there's so many things that are changing, so many things that are getting positive and moving forward. Like, that's a good thing. That's what we should want, right? Another story that I was reading this week was about the marketing TV upfront. And if you are familiar with this from being in the marketing industry, you know that every year, all of the TV networks come out and they talk about their show lineup, and they try and get commitments for advertisers to pay upfront for the shows that they're going to advertise on. And, and one of the things that that is interesting about this is that you have this information asymmetry, what they kind of call it behind this, where the networks know exactly how much money they're going to be getting. And so therefore they can set the prices to be what they set them to. And P&G Chief Brand Officer Mark Pritchard has been one of the really vocal people to say, look, this is crazy. Why are we doing all this lazy media buying? And look, I used to work at the agencies, and I know how lazy some of these media planners and media buyers are. I mean, they literally cut and paste the same plan and say, we're going to spend X hundreds of thousands of dollars or X millions of dollars on the same programs every year because, like, that's what we know. And so we don't branch out from that. We don't invest in minority programs or more diverse content. And that starts to shift now. And I think that's a really, really great opportunity to rethink something that's so fundamental about this world. So those were some of the interesting non-obvious stories of the week. If you get my weekly newsletter, you know that I have lots more stories as well as a non-obvious book recommendation of the week every week. So definitely check out the newsletter. This is how to subscribe to it. And I want to get straight off of the stories and into the main event, which is my good friend Guy Kawasaki, who we have live right now to talk about all sorts of things. And you may know him from the various things he's done. He's written 13 books. He has an amazing, amazing podcast called the Remarkable People Podcast. And he just put out a new edition today with a guy talking all about cars. And I know he's passionate about cars. And so I've got a ton of questions for you. But first of all, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. Well, let's rock and roll. Oh,
We're gonna fix our slight tech issue. So
All right.
microphone
Well,
check.
it says I'm unmuted.
Almost. Let's see if we can get the mic working. I
Yeah.
don't
How
hear
about now?
it sounds like you hear me.
I can hear you fine.
Yeah, I can't. I don't. We don't hear you.
Huh.
Oh,
Let me check things on
okay.
my end.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Got it.
The
So
StreamYard gods are smiling on
let
you.
me. Okay. Awesome. I can hear you. Let me plug in my. Let me plug in these headphones quickly, just so I can hear you. But
Well, the
yeah.
question is, can people hear us?
So let me. Okay. There we go. I got it fixed. I had a double redundancy on here. So, thank you, first of all, for all that you for all that you put out and all that you do. You are a prolific content creator, my friend. It is very, very impressive.
Well, first of all, I think I should set the record straight. So yeah, like audio is working fine.
Yes, it's working fine.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So I should set the record straight. I don't consider myself much of a social media content creator. I consider myself a curator. So I think my role is to find interesting, useful stories that other people have written and promote them. I find that creating is so much harder than curating. And the most creative thing that I do now is my podcast. And so, 105% of my attention goes into my podcast. That doesn't leave me a whole lot of time and effort and intellectual bandwidth to actually create content. So,
Well,
uh,
you're very passionate about your podcast, and I want to talk about that for a second
okay.
because it's very specifically titled "Remarkable People." You've got this amazing the kind of image for it. There it is, right there, of Jane Goodall sort of doing her thing, and she's one of the people that you've interviewed. And I'm
Yeah.
curious, I mean, when you evaluate people for your show, I mean, what makes someone remarkable to get on the show?
Yeah. I wish it was a science. So, first of all, the podcast is called Remarkable People, not rich people, not famous people. So, I think it's someone who has made some remarkable accomplishment. And that doesn't mean you have to be rich or famous. For example, I have a woman who was smuggled across the US border as a baby by coyotes and now works for Adobe. And her story from being an illegal immigrant to now working for Adobe, I consider remarkable.
Hmm.
Yeah, not
Yeah.
that many people have heard of her, but I think that's remarkable.
Now, how do you find someone like that? I mean, does someone who knows someone introduce you, or are you
Yeah,
just like in touch with more remarkable people than the rest of us?
well, both. So, so a lot of times people in my past who I know will say, "Hey, I knew you from the Stanford publishing course where you spoke for us. And my friend is Dion Searcy. She works for the New York Times. She was the Central and West Africa bureau chief for the New York Times and covered Boko Haram. She is a remarkable person." And bada bing, bada bang, Dion Searcy is on Remarkable People. So it happens like that a lot. Now, I will tell you a funny version of this. So every day I get a pitch from a PR person or the person himself or herself. And it kind of starts off like this. Okay. I'm sure you get something like this. Starts off like this. I really enjoy your podcast. I enjoy Jane Goodall, Stephen Wolfram, Christy Yamaguchi, and I, or my client, think that our story is remarkable too, and we should be a guest. And now I'll just switch to as if the person is pitching himself or herself. And so it goes on by saying, yeah, so, my name is Joe Blow, and I have a company called Joe Blow Consulting, and I'm doing middle six-digit consulting right now. I'm a writer and a speaker. I wrote a book called The Blow Way, published by Blow Press, about my concept of how to optimize your sales. And so I believe that I should be on your podcast because I am remarkable. And
And
I
when
get this every freaking day, Rohit.
now obviously you don't bring them on, but do you respond to those? Do you ignore them? I
Yeah.
mean, what do you
Uh,
do?
It depends on what mood I'm in. If I'm cranky, I send them an email that says, I'm sorry, Joe, but I'm just not familiar with your work. So if you can explain how you've dented the universe, like Jane Goodall and Margaret Atwood and Ariana Huffington and Martha Stewart and Christy Yamaguchi, I'll consider you. And 90% of the time, I never hear from that person again.
And the 10% that you do, I'm just curious, like when someone who got that email and did respond, what do they say? Do they say, oh, sorry, I'm not qualified? Or do they have no self-awareness at all? And they're like, well, I think I fit right in with that.
It's the latter. And sometimes, rather than trying to foster another round of communication, sometimes I just tell the person that my agenda is just too full and I just can't add any more interviewees, which is actually the truth. Like this week alone, I interviewed Sal Khan from Khan Academy. I had Mark Benioff scheduled, but he had to postpone. I have Tim Kendall scheduled for tomorrow. I had Kara Golden, who started Hint, and I have an MIT professor who specializes in cybersecurity and privacy. So I had 5 interviews this week, and of the 5, 4 have written a book. So then I have to go and read 4 books to formulate the questions, and then I have to do the interview. I mean,
it's a lot of effort. It's a lot of effort.
It's a lot of effort,
to do a good interview and to research and do all of that. And I'm curious, like when you get so much opportunity, right? I mean, at this point, you've got an amazing network. People introduce you to people. I'm sure you just said you have so many people to interview. Do you then say, okay, I'm going to interview 5 people and then I'm going to release those slowly over 5 weeks? Or do you say, look, I interviewed 5 people this week, so there's 5 episodes next week?
No, we can, my team and I, we can only handle 1 a week. So there are 52 episodes a year. And
so it's a set limited number.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that at some level, if I started releasing 2 or 3 a week, well, A, it would kill us, but B, I'm not sure that people can handle 2 or 3 podcasts a week. I mean,
so
okay,
I want to ask about that in terms of just content curation frequency. I mean, the podcast and listening to one of your podcast interviews. I mean, you're by the way, you're a great interviewer, so it's very entertaining because you bring personality into it, which is great for a listener. You're right. Maybe that form of content would be too much. But then on the flip side, as a content curator, I mean, in an average day from a social media point of view, when you're sharing interesting stories, you're sharing, I don't know, 8-10 stories a day, maybe more. And then you I remember at one point you talked about kind of sharing the same story at different times to reach different people. And that doesn't bother you the way it maybe bothers other people who are like, look, I already posted that. I'm not going to post it again. So like, talk a little bit about your philosophy there when it comes to social sharing versus something long form, like a podcast.
So I will explain my philosophy, but I do not recommend this for most people. So I am 66 years old. I'm chief evangelist of Canva. Canva is doing extremely well. We make 7 million images a day. We have about 35 million monthly active users. So I kind of could not harm Canva if I tried. Okay. And I'm also this podcaster. And at this point in my life at 66, I'm at the tail end of my career. I'm not trying to optimize my LinkedIn profile so that people contact me with opportunities. I'm never going to work for anybody else again. So I have this chronologic freedom to do whatever the hell I want, right? And so I'll take you back to 2016. In 2016, I was a Mercedes-Benz brand ambassador, so I had to go to Germany a lot. So once I went to Germany, I had dinner with 2 friends, and they're about 45 years old at the time. And they said, Guy, this is, again, fall 2016. They said, Guy, to this day, we ask our grandparents, we wonder, how could you let Adolf Hitler come to power? Like, how did he take over the country like that? And then they said to me, Guy, right now, it's like 1930 in America. So, Guy, you have to think about, are your grandchildren going to ask you, did you resist Donald Trump or not? Yeah. And I felt so convicted by that I started coming back. This is before the election. And so I was like all in trying to promote Hillary, and then Hillary lost. So since then, I've been resisting Donald Trump and all the fascism that he stands for on my feed. And I've used all my social media for that. And so I can't recommend that for other people. But if
Well,
you
I
are
mean,
60 years there,
talk about the impact of that, right? You've got, I don't know, like 3 million people following you on LinkedIn, probably more on other platforms. I mean, it's
yeah,
not a small audience.
no,
And so the temptation for some people would be, well, I want to kind of, stay away from that sort of stuff that I know is polarizing. Obviously, that's not your choice.
no,
But,
no, hardly.
has it had a negligible impact for you? I mean, have you seen any people kind of say, look, I don't want to work with you anymore? Or have you seen more people kind of doubling
Oh,
down saying, hey, thank you for standing up for what you believe in? I mean, what is the reaction and do you pay attention to it?
there's a little bit of both. So I think that the people who are, who believe in science, who believe in vaccines, who believe in wearing face masks, who believe in medicine, those kinds of people who believe that climate change is an issue, I think that my sort of willingness to go on the record has brought me closer to them and more loyal to them. On the other hand, there are people who tell me daily, why are you posting political stories on LinkedIn? LinkedIn is a professional network. And there are also people who they're either Russian bots or they're Nazis or they're nationalists or they're misogynists or racists. All of those kind of people are also on LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook. And they try to complain and rip me and, all that. And those people, I just freaking block them. I don't give a shit. I just block them. I don't care.
Yeah.
What people don't understand, many people, now that everybody's a constitutional law expert, is that the First Amendment is to protect people from government suppression of expression. So if Guy wants to block you and suppress you, that's not a First Amendment issue.
That's just a
you know,
personal choice at that point,
yeah.
right?
So the irony is that when people in power currently in the United States complain about suppression and freedom of the press, they are the ones who the First Amendment is meant to prevent
Right.
from suppressing information.
Now you are, just to dig in on this topic a little bit, one of the big themes I think in a lot of discussion right now has been the amount of control and influence and power that big technology companies
Yeah.
have over the way that we see the world and the perceptions that we have. And you've been in the Bay Area for a long time, and I mean, you're a lot of your colleagues and the world that you're in is sort of in that Silicon Valley space. And so I guess,
Yes.
what I'm curious about is, do you feel like Silicon Valley is out of touch with the rest of the world?
That is well, to the extent that any area is out of touch with the rest of the world. I mean, is New York out of touch with the rest of the world? Is Hollywood out of touch with the rest of the world? We're kind of all out of touch with the rest of the world. But
But maybe we don't have the same influence that
well, that's
those
true.
people sitting in Silicon Valley might, right?
So do I think the CEOs of these tech companies are literally immoral? That they are literally, Nazis, white nationalists, et cetera, no. Do I believe that they view their fiduciary responsibility as to optimize, shareholder return, wealth of the company? Yes. Do I believe that's right? No. Let's take a good example. So Apple. I understand that Tim Cook's responsibility is to optimize shareholder return, blah, blah, blah. Okay. But, when I see him palling around with Donald Trump, the White House for the business lunch meeting, and when I see him giving Donald Trump a tour of the factory in Texas that Trump claims that he caused to be open, even though it's been open for 3 years. Do I think that's wrong? Yes. And my logic is that, if Apple, $2 trillion company, cannot stand up to Donald Trump and this misinformation, who can?
Right.
And
Well,
now
and do you
that's
have
why I'm not at Apple nor Tim Cook.
But I
So,
wonder, I mean, as connected as you are and based on where you are, I wonder if you have a temptation to try or an opportunity to try and change some of that from within. Do you feel like you're within? Do you feel like you have that inside
well,
road? I
I
mean,
am.
there's no way I could get to Tim Cook. There's probably a way you could get to him, right?
I don't know if that's true. I mean, I've never met the man. I don't even
Or,
know
I
if
mean,
he knows.
forget him. Maybe like, Mark Zuckerberg or some of these people. I mean,
I don't know any of those people.
yeah,
I have never met Mark Zuckerberg. I've never met Tim Cook. I know Mark Benioff. I know Mark Benioff because I gave him his first job at Apple. Um, yeah, have I met Sanjay at Google? I think so. But I don't roll with billionaires. I don't think I've ever met with
yeah.
Jeff Bezos. So um, listen, I'm just a humble little guy who has a podcast. I mean, I don't view myself as a shaker and a mover.
Well, I mean, that's interesting to me. I don't know how many people would see you as, the little guy, in that sense. But I wonder, I mean, with age, no matter how old you are, comes perspective. And I think that at the point you're at, 66 years old, you are probably on some level, I would imagine, thinking, what are people going to remember about
Yeah,
me? What are they
yeah,
going to, what am I known for? I wonder how you
yeah.
would answer that question.
Okay, it's very easy. I want to be remembered as a person who empowered other people with my books, with my writing, with my speaking, with my advising, with my investing, with my social media. I want people to say, I read Art of the Start 2.0 and it helped me start this company. And, this company is now humongously successful. So I want to be remembered as someone who empowered others.
What would it take, do you think, to create a world where more people thought like that?
Thought about their legacy being empowering people.
I think a lot of people think about that when they are older. I wonder what it would take to get a 20 something or a 30 something or a 40 something for that matter
Yeah.
to think that way, right? I mean, I think when we get later on in life, maybe our perspective just kind of shifts that way.
Well,
But we need younger
I
people to think that way too, right? We need to.
well, I don't, I think many younger people do start companies with such positivity and optimism. I mean, I don't think we should, completely say, okay, so everybody under 60 is insipid plastic, polluting, shareholder optimizing person. Everybody over 60 is a great guy or gal and looking out for the rest of the world. Well, I can tell you a few people who are in the 70s who are definitely not looking out for the world. So it's not a guarantee that when you hit 60 or 70 that
Yeah.
magic happens. Uh, I
Is there something that causes that for people though, do you think? Or is it just kind of, you just either have that personality or you don't, right?
well,
I'm curious because like I would want to live in a world where more people think that way and approach life that way. And I I'm lucky and you're probably lucky in the same way that our personal circles of friends and colleagues, that more of them tend to think that way.
yeah.
But I
Well,
know that there's a lot of people who don't.
I think that there's several factors. So one is an education, so that that the world is a big place. Secondly is travel, so that again that the world is a big place, and you understand that someone who's brown or black or yellow probably is very similar to you. I mean, wanting to make a living, build a life for their children, dent the universe. I don't think that's exclusively white Americans who went to Ivy League schools, and so I think travels. I think education. If you're a man, I think it's having a good spouse who beats the shit out of you when you go off the rails. And also, I think having children. Having children, I think changes your perspective on life.
Yeah, I mean, I think anybody who has children would agree with that.
Well, I can give you some exceptions again, but yeah.
Yeah, probably. um, let's maybe shift gears a little bit and talk about entrepreneurship. You have talked about it, you've written about it, you are an entrepreneur yourself. Do you think entrepreneurship can be taught? And if so or not, do you think it can be taught in university?
Yeah. So I think that many of the functions of entrepreneurship can be taught that otherwise to write a book, but that's beside the point. So there are certain skills, how to pitch, how to recruit, how to launch a product, et cetera, that can be taught. Those are skills that definitely can be taught. Now, if the question is, are entrepreneurs born or made? I think that in a sense, that's a theoretical question that doesn't really matter. I don't think people get up in the morning saying, I'm an entrepreneur. I think people get up in the morning and one day they have created something out of their own need, and entrepreneurship happens to them. So, I suppose that Steve Jobs and Richard Branson and Elon Musk, they're 5 or 6 standard deviations beyond most people. But if someone is a good cook and decides to start a restaurant, to me, that's an entrepreneur. I mean, if you decide to start a food truck, that's an entrepreneur. God bless you. I mean, you're just as good as Steve Jobs in my book.
And I know that one of the things that you have shifted to and spent a lot of time now talking about is evangelism. And you mentioned Mercedes, you mentioned Canva. I know you have a relationship with multiple brands that you work with, and I'm curious, when you must get pitched a lot of different products, and I'm sure it's an easy decision. If something sucks, obviously you don't evangelize it. If something's amazing and you love it already, you say yes. I'm curious if there's something that's just okay. Do you say yes, and when do you say yes?
Well, first of all, that presumes that I have the infallible ability to judge when something is good, bad, or okay.
Well, for you, right? I mean, you have to believe in it, right?
Well, I think I have to want to or do use it. So Canva I was using. Macintosh I wasn't using when I joined there, but when the first time I saw it, it was a religious experience. I understood what I was seeing. So the test for me, I advise a company called Merge4. They make the world's coolest socks. So it's me falling in love with something that does it. And there could be something truly great, and I just wouldn't know that it's truly great because if somebody showed me the most amazing cybersecurity algorithm that could build the next, humongous successful company, I don't have the ability to judge that and know that I'm in the presence of genius.
Yeah, I'm curious. One thing I see in the marketing industry all the time is we can encourage ourselves to believe in how awesome something is based on this self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like, I know colleagues who've worked on something and they read the right research reports and they see the right testimonials and they're like, this thing is the best thing ever, because like it reinforces why they would even work on it in the first place. And when they finally leave, they're like, man, that thing was shit. Like, it wasn't as good as I thought it was. Like, it was just me kind of creating this thing in my head. I'm not saying you're doing that. I'm just, curious about
I have done that.
How much of it is that, and how much of it is it actually being awesome, right?
Yeah, well, I'm not a psychiatrist, but yeah, that absolutely can happen. And in a sense, it has to happen. I mean, if you're starting a company, you have to be a little delusional, because if you just looked at it mathematically, the odds are 99% you're going to fail, right? So, and it's never going to be as easy as you think. And it's just, people don't know what they're getting into when they start a company. And if they knew, they probably wouldn't start a company. So maybe it's better that they don't know. But if entrepreneurship were easy, we would all be Steve Jobs and Elon Musk.
Yeah, that's right. That's true. Well, we're coming close to our time. I think maybe we can close just based on when this is being filmed. We are about, I don't know, 6 weeks away from the U.S. election. What do you think's going to happen? I mean, do you have a sense?
Oh.
What do you? I know what you want to happen, which is probably the same as what I want to happen. But like, what do you think will happen, and what are you kind of watching for?
You know what? I was so wrong. I thought Hillary Clinton would just mop the floor with Donald Trump, and clearly I was completely, utterly wrong. I don't know what's going to happen. I guess the worst case is the votes come in, Biden is a winner. Even after all the mail-in votes are counted, Biden is a winner. Trump says it's fraud, it's fake, it's all that. He refuses to leave. So then what happens? Like literally what happens?
Yeah,
Does the Secret
it's funny
Service
that
say, yeah. I
it's
mean, does the
funny that
Secret
we
Service
are.
say, Don, I hate to tell you, but you lost. You got to get out. Here's Donald Trump goes home one day and on the doorknob it says, you must vacate by January 4th or something. I
Yeah,
really don't know. I mean,
yeah.
you know,
It's funny though that the worst case we're now talking about is not that he wins. The worst case is that he loses and doesn't go, which is, in some sense a victory, I think, for him. The fact that that's the conversation we're having now, as opposed to imagining what it's going to be like kind of moving forward.
well, you bring up a very good point. The worst case is if he wins. I mean, legitimately, to the extent that any election is legitimate. If what if he does win, and then it's 4 more years, 4 more years where he doesn't care about being reelected or anything, and then he says, okay, now my daughter will take over. We'll just be,
Yeah.
we. I think that maybe the country will split apart. Literally, I mean,
Yep.
USSR doesn't exist, so why couldn't USA split up?
Yeah, I mean,
Feasible.
there's definitely a divide happening on geographical lines to some degree,
Yeah, yeah.
within the country. So that's something definitely to be afraid of. Well, you know, we don't have that crystal ball. We don't know
No,
what's
we
going to
don't.
happen, but I do think that the role that you play and the role that curators in general, which is something you talked about before, play is really important to me. One of the big points of view that I share every week on this show is it is so important to have a non-obvious perspective. And what that means is listening to people who don't agree with you. You don't have to, choose to be best friends with them. You don't have to silently nod. But knowing what the perspective is of someone who doesn't think the way you do is hugely valuable because you don't become narrow-minded as a result. And I think you put out a lot of content that you share, and also your amazing podcast, the Remarkable People podcast, is a great example of that. We have talked in the past. I know just maybe a month and a half ago, we did an interview where you talked specifically about books and your perspective on books. We didn't really dig too much into that now, but we have a whole other video for that. So we'll share that and the link for how to watch that so that anybody can kind of check that out
Did
at any time later on.
did
There's so
did
much.
people did
Yeah.
people watch uh, that interview about books and say, "What the hell is he talking about?" I mean, basically everything I said was contrary to probably everything you believe, right? So,
Yeah. Well, not necessarily. I mean, you talk about writing and marketing a book, and one of the things that you talked about there was just this idea that at some point you don't really need to do another book, and you don't want to. And look, you're at a different point than other people would be. But I just think it was interesting. It's just a fun conversation, and so that's worth checking out for sure. I just want to say thank you for spending some time with me, for sharing your perspective. I want to recommend to everybody who's watching the show right now to definitely listen to Guy's podcast. It is a fantastic one. He already mentioned some of the guests that are coming up on the podcast, but it is truly Remarkable People, and they are fantastic conversations. Highly, highly recommended. So thank you so much for being
thank
part
you,
of the show.
thank you. It's I always enjoy doing these interviews with you. Often you get me in trouble, but that's okay. So,
I don't think you really care about that at this point. I think you're good with it. Well,
okay,
thank
take
you.
care.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Bye.
And just to everybody watching, thank you again for tuning into the Non-Obvious Insights show. We'll be back again next Thursday with another fantastic show, another fantastic interview, and lots of unusual, interesting, non-obvious stories. So until then, have an amazing week. See different perspectives, see what others miss, and always, always stay non-obvious.
Hey, Rohit, stick around. I'm going to ask